Welcome to KRQE's New Mexico News Insiders. Here's Gabrielle Burkhart and Chris McKee. Sponsored by New Mexico PBS.
So Gabby, when we talk about the heart of the city, and in context here, Albuquerque, what for you comes to mind?
I have to say, like, what immediately comes to mind is kind of downtown, because that's where you think everything is centralized and we work downtown. I know you lived downtown. I don't know. I feel like my mind gravitates toward that.
I think just like generally, for sure, like just in, I think, American culture, downtowns come to mind the most part when you talk about the heart of the city. You know, and that's where you see the tall buildings, the density as well. But I think in referring to the heart of the city as well, we can think about that in one of the most dense parts of the city as well. So not necessarily downtown. In this case, when we're referring to the heart of the city, I think we're talking about one of the older parts that's really been around since the post-World War II boom in Albuquerque.
Yeah, today we are zooming in on more than 230 acres of state-owned land in Albuquerque. It's famous for hosting the New Mexico State Fair. Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham made waves in December announcing that the state is looking for ideas on how to potentially move the fair from the Fairgrounds in a push to redevelop the entire Expo New Mexico site, which sits between the International District and Midtown Albuquerque.
Yeah, it's one that is a big idea here, and one that could be monumental when you consider how that could change land use in already what is one of the densest parts of Albuquerque. And today we wanted to get some local perspective about this idea from one of the two city councilors that really represents that area around the fairgrounds. This is City Council District 6, and that is represented by Councilor Nicole Rogers, who joins us here on the podcast for the first time. Councilor Rogers, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Welcome to the show. And for people who aren't familiar who you are yet, I want to get a little bit into your background. So you're a relatively new member of City Council in Albuquerque, representing District 6 after the departure of Pat Davis from City Council. You're about 1 year into your first 4-year term after being elected in 2023. According to your bio, you're a native New Mexican, mother of 2, and South Los Altos resident, representing, again, District 6, which covers the UNM area, the International District, and Nob Hill in southeast Albuquerque. So first, tell us, why'd you run for City Council, and what's it been like so far?
My grandma made me do it.
Okay.
I'll be honest that she heard me. She heard me on the phone. I was visiting her. She lived with my parents, and she heard me on the phone with someone who was encouraging me to run. And I said, no, thank you. I said no about 8 times to doing this. And she said, well, what are they asking you to do? And I said, they want me to run for city council, and I don't really want to do it. And she was like, well, why? And there was 3 very specific things, like the pay. Number 1 was $33,000 a year. City council you're expected to be there part-time, which was shocking to me. And I know that I couldn't raise my 2 kids as a single mom on that. That was really the biggest thing. And so she said, well, tell them what the barriers are. Tell everybody, tell God, tell everybody what the barriers are. If they get removed, then you know this is what you're supposed to do. And I was like, okay, fine, Grandma. I'm not going to say no to my grandma. She was at the end of her life, right? So I was like, okay, Grandma, fine. Let's say the thing. Said the thing, and I kid you not, 2 weeks later, every single barrier was removed, including the pay. The board that decides what we get paid, after years and years of trying, they decided to do it. And that was shocking because I thought for sure that was the one that was going to make sure I didn't have to do it. Then I went back and told my grandma, and she said, and I was like, I still don't want to do it. She looked me dead in my eye and she said, if you don't do this, everything you do from now on it'll fail. I was like, what, Grandma? What? So I did it. And she knew. She passed the day I took the oath of office. It's like she waited to the day. So I feel like I'm walking in my purpose. It's a little overwhelming still, but I'm easing into the role, and I hit the ground running, and I hope people think I'm doing a good job.
Wow. So this was not in your plans.
No. I still think sometimes like but I do feel like I'm easing into my purpose, and I feel like my purpose is to represent folks who don't have a voice, who have a voice, but it's not listened to.
I see.
Yeah.
What's that first year been like?
Man, it's been a whirlwind. I am a full-time counselor. So I knew the first year I wanted to be full-time so that I can learn. My district has full-time issues. And so I've learned a ton. I've taken this year to just pour through the data, learn, continue to listen to community, launching some major projects, and just took the time to learn. So next year, watch out. I'm ready to go.
Okay.
We will certainly watch out. You know, we've had conversations on this podcast. You mentioned your district has full-time issues, right? We've certainly had conversations about, you know, some of the elements of the International District. It's an area that's rich in culture, in history, and some of the best little-known restaurants, for example, are there. It includes historic stretches of Central. We also know the neighborhood has really struggled over the years. That comes from both investment from government, investment from private business. We've seen just examples of Walmart, CVS, and Walgreens all pulling out of retail locations there. We certainly know crime and homelessness are factors there in the district. I wanted to ask how you define the district. What are the things you celebrate, and what are the things that are problematic?
Yeah, I think I celebrate the people who live in this district. In our district, including the International District, love our neighborhoods. We a lot of folks have been there for generations, and really have a vested interest in seeing our area grow responsibly, but also just have, to your point, we've been completely uninvested in. Like there's been no investments into our district until recently. There's been a push to reinvest into the International District. And I think what we need to remember is that this is also an area that for the entire county of Bernalillo has all of the poverty centered in our district. And it's not just situational poverty. This is generational poverty, which means people don't have the safety nets. People don't have the knowledge that we are imparted to other communities about how to really center ourselves and have an economic anchor. We don't have an economic anchor in the International District. And so that's something I'm really focusing on is poverty alleviation, because we know from research, and we know that once we take care of people and give them not a handout, but a hand up, that will ripple across the whole community. And we need to be working on poverty and alleviating suffering. Because when I drive around my district and I hear the narrative of my district, we're not talking about suffering. I drive around my district. I live on Wyoming and Central, so I'm not in the. I'm in the generals of Central.
Yeah.
Okay. So I laugh when I get emails like, you need to take a drive around your district. Well, honey, I live here. Like for real. Not in Ridgecrest or the nice areas where most of our representatives for the last 20 years have come from our district. We've not had a representative from the Southeast, and now we do. And that doesn't mean I'm not going to love on Nob Hill and Ridgecrest and make sure that they have what they need. But we need to make sure we have what's happening in the Southeast, or guess what? It's going to be in Nob Hill. And I'm already talking to business owners about the things that they're facing there.
Yeah.
It's coming down. So that's where I need to focus, because that's where the need is.
And when you talk about, an economic center, does that mean, trying to attract the big fish, like a job center or something like that?
I'm really digging into what that means. And so I need to go back to economics 101 and what are the things that actually, I'm looking a lot and studying a lot of what's happening in Mesa del Sol, because that's a part of our district that is looking at, okay, yeah, we're building the housing, but we need the economic anchors where people can work and go to school and all of those things, infrastructure, right? It's interesting because we need the same things down the hill and up to the right? But how are we doing the same type of thing that we're doing in Mesa del Sol for the others? So I'm really studying what's happening there. And also just looking at the land. We're landlocked. So first thing I did was look at what is available land for housing is a big need, right? Where is the available land in my district for us to build? And we're landlocked by CNM, UNM, APS, the state, the county. The city don't own a lot of land in my district, and there's not a lot of available land. So when we talk about things like the state fair and 236 acres in the middle of my district, I definitely want to be a part of that conversation.
Okay. On the solutions side, and we'll take this a little bit in layers because there's a lot to unpack in the international district. What do you think can help address some of those biggest challenges in the international district and the broader District 6 that you represent?
Absolutely. So first and foremost, I think that we have to get a handle on public safety. I think, and I think of public safety as more than just police, because it's more than just police. We have ACS, Albuquerque Community Safety, we have Albuquerque Fire and Rescue, and we have APD. We need to make sure that they're doing what they're good at and what we need them to be doing, right? Police in my district, we need them making sure they're going after violent crime, right? Violent crime. That's what I need them to be focusing on. I don't think anybody, all the activists, my heart activists in me, nobody disputes that that's what we need them to be focusing on, not the social service issues that they tend to have to focus on a lot. And now with Albuquerque Community Safety, my goal is to get them funded at the same level as Albuquerque Fire and Rescue and APD, because they are not even close. And if we want them, we also need ACS to have the capability to actually house people. Right now, ACS can go out, offer services, and they're offering shelter at the West Side Shelter. People don't want to go there, right? We know that. And so we have to fix making sure that they can get folks off of the streets directly into a bed. And they're not able to do that right now because they're not given the budget for that at the city of Albuquerque. That's a completely different department in health, housing, and homelessness. And I used to have to work with ACS and get help when I worked for the administration before I became a counselor. And it's humiliating as a department to have to sit there and call all of the people that the other department funds. We call them, hey, we have this client from ACS that needs a voucher. And they're going, what? The city gave us this money for our client pool for vouchers. Why are you calling us for the vouchers you're giving us? Because no one thought to give ACS some money for vouchers so that they can actually take people and put them into housing. So that's the thing that I'm working on right now, and figuring out how I can get ACS more funding so that they can actually do what they're best at doing. And they're the department that's being innovative. We have people from all over cities, from all over the country coming to Albuquerque to find out what we're doing, because it is taking almost 80,000 calls away from APD that they do not need to be taking.
Yeah. Well, it's fascinating, and certainly I know the mayor has talked about rehabbing the voucher program over the next year as one of his priorities. I think he mentioned in the State of the City address as well. So
yeah, I'm glad he's listening.
Yeah.
Because these are things I've been vocal about all year, and even when I worked for him. Very vocal on the brokenness of that system.
Yeah.
I would love to see some healthy competition. Let's give half of the budget to ACS, leave half of it in HHH, give them some metrics that they gotta follow or track over a year, and see who does it better. And then that's who gets to run the program. My leadership development class, that works.
Well, let's get a little bit of background, of course, to what we talked about to start off the show, obviously. And you mentioned here this whole idea around Expo. So bear with me with a little explanation here. The idea of bringing you on here was really to talk about something that could very much affect the heart of Albuquerque, as we said, the state's consideration of redeveloping Expo New Mexico. State put out an RFP, that's a request for proposals. It's open until January 24th, and that RFP is asking developers to submit ideas for making a master plan to redevelop the Expo site. In a news conference announcing this, the state suggested that the redevelopment would mean moving the Fairgrounds to a new location, and then also welcoming a slew of ideas around what could take the place on that major swath of property. So again, it's 236 acres. It's bordered by Lomas, Central, San Pedro, and Louisiana, some of our major streets here in the city. The state says, in part, what's driving this is they feel they've sort of outlived the life of the property, and it's time to maybe move the fair elsewhere.
And Councilor Rogers, your district, as we mentioned, borders this property. So I want to hear your reaction to this news. Did you know it was coming? What were your initial thoughts?
Yeah, no, I definitely hadn't had a whole lot of conversations with the governor's office directly. I definitely had some conversations with Mayor Marty Chavez, who's kind of leading this effort for the governor. But I think what I heard at the press conference being there is I heard both options, right? To reinvest in where we're at now, upgrade it, because again, this goes into the investments in this area. That includes the state fairgrounds. We haven't made major investments into this parcel of land, even as a state, right? And then also the other option to move it and potentially then have 236 acres to redevelop. So my phones have been blowing up from neighborhood associations, business owners, neighbors, near and far, who are wanting to weigh in on this. And I feel like my job as their representative is to make sure that their voices are heard. My concerns, and I think concerns of the community, is okay, if the state decides, because let's be clear, the city has no say here. I don't have a say. The mayor doesn't have a say. This is state land, so the state can do what they would wish to do. So let's say it does move and we raise all this money in the legislature to have a big, beautiful new state fair somewhere else. I would like to see a 1-to-1 investment. Whatever you raise to move it, you raise to redevelop this parcel of land. Because what I don't want to have happen is we have a shell of our history and no money to do anything with, and that's going to make the issues in my district worse. The other thing, of course, I said is what's the economic analysis to see if what's that going to do to the area. I know that the area on San Pedro across from the state fairgrounds is historically the black business district, right? Who a lot of our businesses there rely on state fair parking as a fundraiser for the year. Business owners around there rely on that. Gas stations, all the things that are in the peripheral area. What is that going to do to those businesses as well? So I just want us to do this responsibly. I also don't want to price people out of their neighborhoods, especially the grandmas that live. I mean, we have a lot of elderly seniors that live in my district. And so I want to make sure that whatever we do there also just doesn't price them out of their homes too. So I think we need to think about responsible growth. And hey, the state fair moves, and we have an opportunity to annex that into the city, because there's going to need to be resources there, fire services, police services, infrastructure. And then let's dream big, right? What about a Central Park? What about, like, we can think big. Yes, we need housing, but we need mixed income housing, not just all low income housing. Because if not, then we're not going to be able to sustain the retail. If we do not make sure, and we're not going to be able to sustain business growth if we don't make sure we have mixed incomes. And that is economics 101. Like, we have to have the income to sustain the retail and the businesses that we want to attract, including a grocery store, a pharmacy, all the things that we need in this area.
We'll be right back with more of the New Mexico News Insiders.
Hi, I'm Logan Rader, host of New Mexico Living. New Mexico News Insiders is sponsored by New Mexico PBS.
If you like New Mexico News Insiders, learn more about New Mexico in Focus, a weekly hour-long show analyzing decisions impacting New Mexico statewide. Stream it anytime, anywhere. Visit nmpbs.org and follow them on all social media platforms.
Now back to New Mexico News Insiders.
To the point of dreaming big, the Expo Grounds, they have a lot to them. You mentioned, there's a historic buildings in there. There's also Tingley Coliseum. It's one of the region's few indoor arenas actually designed to hold big crowds that are, not associated with the university. There's also the Downs Racetrack and Casino, the Racino. As Mayor Keller said in a previous episode, he mentioned that property takes up a huge chunk there as well. Let's say it were redeveloped. Should it be turned into a new neighborhood, a mixed-use property, or something else?
I think all of the above. It's 236 acres, so we could do a lot here. And I think it needs to be rooted in community, though. Like hands down, my superpower is community engagement and making sure that my constituents, whether you voted for me or not, have a voice at the table, and our needs are being considered for the immediate area that's going to be affected, because our needs are great. And yes, we need housing, we need green space, we need pharmacies, we need grocery stores, all of the things. Trees, it's the heat index in this area is astronomical. I mean, it's going up and up every year.
Yeah,
so
not much of a canopy over there.
No,
for sure.
So we need, my dream, if it was up to just me, I'd put a Central Park New York style Central Park with housing around it, retail around it, shopping, like revitalize it to where it's a place that you can walk easily, bike easily, not just for cars. Like, let's think about how to redevelop this. And let's be real, the long-term lease on the casino and the Downs, I don't see that that's going to be moving because that still has a very long lease. So I think that's going to be interesting how they carve that out because that's a long-term lease. I don't see that that's leaving. Yep. And whatever your opinions, I hear a lot of them from my constituents about what that brings to that corner, positive or not. And so... Yeah.
And when we look at the housing picture in the International District, it's a dense part of Albuquerque. These are state-owned grounds at Expo. Mm-hmm. If we do see something like a mixed-use housing development there, or maybe if we don't, like, where else could you look in the city for housing?
That's exactly the problem, is being landlocked by all the available like vacant land are owned by those entities, including the state. So yeah, we need them to get involved. And the other thing is those entities are also not subject to our land use and zoning laws. So they can build things on that state grounds faster than the city can, because we are subject to our own land use and zoning laws, which means if the governor wanted to develop it before they annexed it to the city, she can do things like duplexes and fourplexes and things that we haven't been able to pass on city council to change our land use and zoning laws so we can get that density. But the truth is that we need housing on all income levels. MFA put out an amazing report that said we do need housing, not just low income, not just affordable. We need housing on all of the income levels. So I'd like to see mixed income housing developments going in, and including home ownership, because the only way we're going to get folks out of poverty and out of this housing instability cycle is home ownership. And so I'd like to see, how do we also incentivize home ownership and do some more work around that. And that's one of the things I'm really focused on in my district. We have majority of people in my district are renters. Only 43% of the folks in my district own their homes. We've got to tip that scale the other way. And that's how I'm going to help get people out of poverty, because as a single mom, that's what changed my housing stability, was owning my own home. If not, the rug can be pulled from under you. The rent can be raised, like we're seeing. There's no tenant rights. Like, you're at the mercy of other people all the time.
You mentioned that, your phones were getting blown up with this after this announcement happened. What do you think the neighborhood wants here? As of recording this here in early December, have you heard some of that discussion? I take it yes. From neighbors or neighborhood association leaders, any of those folks.
Emails, phone calls have been off the hook for us, which we're excited that people are reaching out to us, because they feel like my office is a place that they feel like they can be heard and get the right information about how to get involved in the process. And I think that's what we've been doing, is just hearing from folks, giving them the opportunities on how they can get involved in the processes. I'll be holding some community meetings around this so that we can document that and really share that with the governor's office, because that's one thing I did not see in the RFP when I read it, was enough community engagement. There was like clauses that if you're an out-of-state, developer, you only have to come to town twice to save you costs, right? Like, that's not good enough. So I will be taking that on myself and then giving the governor's office, here's what I'm hearing from my constituents, because they want a voice.
What are you hearing? Like, can you gauge a majority opinion yet?
It's mixed. I think the majority of the folks that live there do not want to see it move. Hands down, I think I can confidently say that most folks that live around there do not want to see it go. It's a part of their, I hear a lot about the historical nature of our neighborhood, and people, business owners and people even who live around the fair. There's this narrative that they hate the fair, and I'm not hearing that. I'm hearing that folks really do love it being there. It's a historic part of our community, including the stretches of Central. My district has the largest stretch of Central, and we're getting ready for the centennial meal that's coming up on Route 66. So the fair is on Route 66. So what can we do to also make that look better, like some green spaces and trees and more walkability?
Yeah, and I believe the fairgrounds have been there since
1938.
Yeah, so it's quite a historic property.
Yeah,
it is.
And we recently did talk to Mayor Tim Keller on this podcast about this very idea. He mentioned also that it has been discussed by past mayors over the years, and how there have been proposals in the past to sort of redevelop the corners of this lot to be more commercialized and implement through access to neighboring roads, taking down those walls that surround the Racino section. The mayor argued that if you open up an area like that, it will just automatically become safer because you can have a line of sight, you can see, go in and out. Right now, Expo is entirely walled off in that section. Do you agree with that general idea that just like opening up the area might make it safer?
Well, hearing from my business owners who are erecting fences and things to make themselves feel safer, no, I think more police actually taking 911 calls will make us feel safer, not knocking down walls. I mean, I'm all for, I don't want to see my entire district fenced and boarded and walled up like you can drive around and see. So no, I don't think, I think the built environment absolutely can drive safety. And so I think, but I don't know that it's going to make people feel safer. I know I need more officers in my district taking 911 calls. We don't even have enough officers taking 911 calls, much less being proactive.
This might be a tough question to answer here because a lot of it really depends on a ton of factors, and they're really beyond, your control and even folks in the neighborhood's control. But, if this has been discussed for years, you're leaning on market forces, private developers, state approval, and also there's this component of what the neighborhood wants. Practically, what are the chances that you think something can actually get done here?
Well, here, I love history and I love looking at what, that's the best predictor of future.
Right.
We all heard that saying.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think being realistic of the landscape, the governor has 2 years left. Well,
she is entering the midterm, essentially at this point.
Yeah, so I think that's why the timeline, 6 months to get this RFP on the master plan done. So I think that the timeline is such that the political landscape, there's a time clock there. In my year working in city council, things run real slow in government. So I don't know. I think it depends on how they actually are going to do this. If they're going to sell off pieces to the highest bidders based on the RFPs, that could be problematic. I hope that's not the case. But I think we're asking for developers to tell us so that we would have to wrap the land into the deal, right? And so I don't know. I'm cautiously optimistic, I guess is the best I can say about that. But I know the wheels of government move slow. So I think we're going to have the state fair here for at least the next 5-6 years. Just seeing how slow things work.
Yeah. Just a prediction, of course, and we'll see what happens. But I understand where you're coming from, though.
Yeah. I think we've all had that experience. Just working in news, knowing how slow the wheels of government can be. I want to mention too, Dan Morning. He's the general manager at Expo New Mexico and a big voice for the state fair. He recently said in one of our newscasts that he wants the state fair to stay put, not to move it outside of Albuquerque. You mentioned maybe a lot of people calling you or are agreeing with that idea. I think part of the thinking is, it is kind of in central Albuquerque. And if we want people to be attracted to that area, maybe the idea of making it look better and keeping it there is also on the table.
Yeah. I heard that loud and clear at the press conference. I know we didn't hear that from the small clips that we get to see as a public. But I think both options are on the table. And I would say that if we've outgrown, I heard that from the commission during the State Fair Commission who is running this RFP, not a state department, by the way. It's the State Fair Commission, which is a commission of 3
Yeah, it's 3 or 5. I'm
Yeah,
not
3 to
entirely
5 people.
certain.
I met
We can
3
double
of them.
check, yeah.
Yeah, I
let me
met
double
3 of
check
them
it,
at the meeting. I think, I would like to see an investment in this area and keep it where it's at. But again, I'm open to thinking big and thinking about it, but just making sure that if it does move, again, we get that 1-to-1 investment. Whatever the legislature gives to move it and build a state-of-the-art one, we want the same dollar to go to redeveloping it here.
6 people.
6.
The State Fair Commission. Yeah. Eric Cerna, the chairman, a longtime political force here in New Mexico as well. If the State Fair, you think, is eventually moved out of the international district right in the middle of the city there, and we should also note that it borders another district by led by your co-counselor, Tammy Feeblecorn, as well, or your fellow counselor, I should say. If it is moved out of there to another part of the city, somewhere like Mesa del Sol, which you did mention is also in your district, do you see any potential downside to moving the State Fair out?
Yeah, I think the downside for me is the investment. If we do not get the same 1-to-1 investment, if the decision is made to move it, my concern is the city of Albuquerque does not have the money it's going to take to really do something to the best, highest use for the community of that 236 acres. That is my absolute biggest concern. I think also the second concern is how is the community's voice going to be taken into account? And making sure that we are a part of this process.
Is there anything else that you want people to know listening either about this topic or the international district that we haven't directly asked you about?
Yeah, I think I'm on a mission to change the narrative. Like we know, I'm very clear on our issues. And I think, that's always highlighted, in just always, every medium, it's highlighted.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of news reporting. I mean, we can't escape
absolutely.
the fact that we certainly had to have done many stories about the international district. And,
absolutely.
And, there are a lot of them that gravitate towards the problems.
Yeah,
certainly.
absolutely. So I think my ask is that we, if we cover a challenge, that we cover a highlight, and something that also is, we have some great synergy right now. We're doing participatory budgeting in our district where for the first time in Albuquerque, community members have a say in how we spend our capital dollars for our district. That's huge because where we're spending tax dollars is directly going to be decided by the community in my district. So we have synergy. Plus, it's amazing. They're basically our eyes and ears out there, and they know what they need in their community. And it's my job to align the city's budget to meet those needs. And so I'm really excited about that. I think we have synergy of infrastructure, things that people want and need. And I'm hopeful. I'm a forever optimist. But I know we have some tough challenges that I need the administration's help with. I need other counselors' help with. There's this unspoken thing that everybody gets pushed to my district because we have 67% of the homelessness and substance abuse resources in my district. I need other counselors to get in the game and help out when it comes to funding so that I can do what I need to do in my district for the infrastructure. We need public restrooms. We need simple things like trash cans. I don't have trash cans on Central like we do downtown or like we do in Nob Hill. Why doesn't the entire stretch of Central deserve trash cans? People I talk to in encampments are like, we would love to clean up after ourselves, but then the business owner gets mad when we put stuff in their dumpster. No one's handing out trash bags with the food boxes, right? I'm happy to clean up after myself, but we get in trouble for doing that, right? So simple things, infrastructure things that we can do. People love to talk about my first bill, the poop patrol. It was your first bill. I have a public health background, okay? And I understand how we spent a whole lot of time in our council meeting talking about pigeon poop and how much hazard, right, pigeon poop is. And we have $40,000 a year we're spending on that. But now they want to talk about not wanting to spend the money on cleaning up people poop. Like that.
Yeah.
When all we need is a public restroom, and we won't have to do that either. We can't train the pigeons to go poop in a public bathroom, but we can do it for humans.
Yeah.
So it's odd, the conversations, and it makes me sad because we're having these conversations about pigeons. It's the same conversation we're having about people. But the difference is we can't go and round up the people and kill them like we do the pigeons, right?
The poo is a problem. You got to address it.
And guess what? I don't care who you are, what you look like, where you come from. Everybody's got to go.
Yes.
Can we just bring some dignity back and some like compassion to the conversation? Like, let's think of it. And that's one thing I have to say is that before I came to the city, I worked at UNM Hospital training nurses. And I used to have to train nurses on compassion fatigue. And that's what I'm seeing in the community right now. We have a thing and across the whole city where people are just fed up with seeing the suffering, which is sad, right? Like, oh, poor you. You have to watch other people suffer. That's my first thought, right? Oh, right. But the dilemma, I think, it's a moral dilemma for my district. People want to protect where they've chosen to build a home, raise their families, but also don't want to see the suffering that they have to see every day and day in and day out, but don't know what to do to help, don't know how to help. But that's dangerous. In nursing, when nurses have compassion fatigue, they could miss something. Someone can get hurt or die. It's going to be the same here. People are going to start retaliating against each other. Like, we just need to bring the empathy and the compassion and the dignity back to this conversation. And drive solutions from there, not criminalizing poverty.
We'll be right back with more on New Mexico News Insiders.
Hi, I'm Monica Wicki, host of New Mexico Living. This episode of New Mexico News Insiders is sponsored by New Mexico PBS. If you enjoy New Mexico News Insiders, check out New Mexico in Focus, a great source for insights about what's happening in our state. Catch their podcasts and videos at nmpbs.org or stream it anytime, anywhere on the free PBS app. Now, let's continue to New Mexico News Insiders.
Sounds like a lot on your plate for the next year. Happy 2025. Good luck, and we wish you all the best. But there's a lot there to unpack in the international district, and it sounds like
but I don't feel alone in it. Our community is right there with us, like right there working. All of us are in the trenches coming up with, we have alley projects going on to beautify our alleys. We have that project has matched up with the school. We're doing a safe walking bus to school where we have volunteers helping kids get to school safely who have to walk in Wilson and Whittier area, where we have a lot of homelessness and these kids are walking through things they shouldn't be having to walk through to get to school. So I don't feel alone. We have a lot of people pulling together, and that's what it's going to take. All hands on deck. We need everybody to help pull us up.
Yeah. Well, certainly one of the most challenged districts, but also, when you have challenges, it's also one of the most interesting ones where things are happening, new ideas are coming to fruition to try to solve problems. And you can certainly hear that in the things that you're saying. So good luck as well, and we appreciate you joining us for this conversation. Councilor Rogers, thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. Again, a big thanks to Councilor Nicole Rogers for joining us here on this podcast, and hopefully it was at least a little bit of illumination on her thoughts on the international district and also what this development means. The RFP is open until January 24th, so that is the deadline for companies to submit their ideas about it. And the state, they've got about $500,000 to spend on this RFP.
Yeah, and if a company is picked, they will develop the plan for what becomes of Expo New Mexico. Like we mentioned, it's about 236 acres there. The Governor, Michelle Lujan Grisham, says she wants to have a sense of which direction this is all going by the end of the legislative session, which this year it's a 60-day session starting in January and ending on March 22nd.
Yeah, so midterm of Governor Lujan Grisham's tenure, second term. It is, I think there are some discussion about, is this going to be a project that she sees through or would move over to another administration? It's hard to believe that if the governor who started this would not want to try to finish it if possible. So we'll find out. If you have an idea, let us know. Chris.McKee at krqe.com, also at Chris McKee TV is how to reach me.
And I am Gabrielle.Burkhart at krqe.com via email and gburknm on social media. Thank you all for listening and watching.